As a famous architect, Jacob Caldwell was a man of order. His life was structured in a way that left no room for chaos, just like the buildings he planned. His work was proceeding smoothly, his home was operating efficiently, and his son Oliver was growing up in a state of complete stability. But all of that fell apart in an instant as he walked by the big window in his house. In the garden, Jacob's 12-year-old son Oliver was dancing, but he wasn't alone. Sophia Bennett, the family's housekeeper, was standing next to him and directing his every move. Jacob hadn't given Sophia Bennett much thought since she started working for the family 6 months ago. Jacob blinked, certain that his mind was deceiving him, but Oliver was actually dancing, and what frightened Jacob the most wasn't the act itself, but the way his son was smiling. Jacob stood motionless by the window, unable to divert his gaze from the sight before him. Oliver danced with hesitant, shaky steps that were far from perfect, but he was determined. He stumbled a few times and almost tripped, but instead of getting angry, he laughed in a way that Jacob hadn't heard in years since his wife died. Oliver had shut himself off and buried his feelings. Jacob had tried to make up for it by giving his son everything he needed: stability, structure, and a life free of chaos. But now, right in front of his eyes, Sophia Bennett, a housekeeper, was doing something Jacob hadn't been able to do. She was making his son happy again, and Jacob didn't like it. Sophia walked with an elegance that didn't belong to a housekeeper. Each step was precise and deliberate, not the improvised playfulness of an amateur, but the execution of someone who had received training. She wasn't just entertaining Oliver, she was teaching and guiding him. Jacob felt uneasy about the idea of a stranger having such power over his son. When he stepped outside, Oliver was the first to notice him, and the boy instantly froze. His earlier joy turned to fear, but Sophia stayed calm. She just wiped her hands on her apron before standing up to meet Jacob's sharp gaze. "What's going on here?" he asked in a cool, collected voice. Oliver dropped his head and couldn't answer, but Sophia met Jacob's stare with unwavering determination. "We were practicing, sir," she said. "Just practicing what your son is keen to learn how to do: dance." Jacob looked at Oliver and asked, "Since when?" The boy paused for a moment before murmuring, "For a while now." Jacob felt a sharp pang of guilt go through his chest. Why hadn't he noticed? He stared at his son with a growing sense of frustration. Why had Oliver never told him, and why didn't you tell me? His voice was low and strong, not raised, and it was heavy with authority that wasn't said. Before Oliver could answer, his father's gaze made his small shoulders slump a little. He just shrugged. Sophia spoke in a cool, firm voice because he didn't have anyone to practice with. Jacob narrowed his eyes and looked at her. There was something in her voice that made him angry. It wasn't her job, he told her. Sophia remained still and replied, "No, it's not." "May I ask why you were handling it?" She folded her arms, and I couldn't read her face. "Because he asked me to," she said. Jake asked Oliver, "Is that true?" Oliver nodded, but there was a flash of doubt in his eyes. There was a long pause. Jacob took slow, deep breaths, trying to hold back the anger that was starting to eat away at the edges of his calm. He had no good reason to be this upset, but something about the whole thing felt off. In the world of business, Jacob never disregarded his instincts. They had helped him build an empire by letting him know when something wasn't what it seemed to be. Right now, those gut feelings told him that something wasn't right. Sophia Bennett wasn't just a cleaner, no matter what. As Jacob walked back into the house, he looked over his shoulder and saw Oliver lean in close to Sophia and say something. Sophia tilted her head and replied in a voice that Oliver couldn't hear, giving him a small, suspicious smile. Jacob felt a shiver run down his spine. This wasn't what it seemed, and he was determined to find out what it was. Jacob sat in his office with his eyes fixed on the computer screen in front of him. It showed everything he could find about Sophia Bennett, or at least everything that was available to the public. Sophia Bennett was 29 years old and had been Jacob's housekeeper for 6 months. She had no criminal record and no suspicious past. It seemed like everything about her was too normal. It couldn't be a maid who could teach Oliver how to dance like that. There was one word that had been bothering him ever since he saw her move dancing. He quickly moved his fingers across the keyboard of Sophia Bennett Ballet. At first, there was nothing there, but then, hidden under old news stories, he found it. Without a trace, Jacob's heart beat faster as he clicked the link. A picture of a young woman in a clean white ballet costume standing on a grand stage with her arms straight showed that it was Sophia. The story talked about her meteoric rise in the ballet world, including performances in prestigious theaters and invitations to dance festivals around the world. And then she was gone. Jacob clenched his teeth. Why would someone with that much potential give up everything to become a housekeeper? There was only one way to find out. He walked out of his office quickly and straight into the kitchen, where Sophia was wiping down the counter. She looked up at him with a neutral but guarded look on her face. "Mr. Caldwell?" she asked calmly. Jacob did not answer right away. Instead, he took out his phone and set it on the counter. The screen displayed the story and her picture. "Explain this," he said in a cold, unwavering voice. For the first time since they met, Jacob saw a moment of surprise on Sophia's face. She looked at the screen and then back at him, saying, "You've been looking for me." It was just a matter of fact. She wasn't angry. Jacob folded his arms and said, "I don't like mysteries in my home." Sophia slowly breathed in and laid the cloth down for a moment. He thought she might refuse to answer, but after a long silence, she spoke. Her voice was quieter than before. "I was a dancer a long time ago." Jacob narrowed his eyes and said, "You weren't just a dancer, you were a star." She smiled bitterly. Jacob looked at her closely and asked, "Why did you leave?" She hesitated, and he could see the inner struggle she was having about whether to tell him the truth. Finally, she sighed, "Because I lost everything." Jacob said nothing, because he knew that if he pushed her too hard, she might shut down completely, but Sophia didn't. She looked down at her hands before speaking again, her voice steady but tinged with an old pain. "Back then, dance was everything to me. I trained my whole life believing in it," she said. She paused, stating that I should have been on stage. "I wasn't alone," Job said, tilting his head. "Who is Ethan?" she asked. "He's my fiancé, and he's a dancer too. We grew up together and trained together, and now we're going on our biggest career opportunity, an international tour." Jacob had a strange tightness in his chest because he knew where this was going. However, the night before our most significant performance, Sophia persevered with unwavering focus, while Ethan tragically lost his life in a car accident. There was a heavy silence between them. Jacob wasn't easily scared, but he couldn't deny how important her words were. "After that, I couldn't dance," he said. Sophia said, "Now that my voice is quieter, every time I heard music or walked on stage, I saw him. Everything I had built my life around was gone, so I disappeared." With a softer look, Jacob folded his arms and said, "Now you're teaching my son how to dance." Sophia took a deep breath and turned to face him. "He reminds me of myself when I was his age," she said. "What do you mean?" Jacob asked. "What do you mean?" Sophia smiled, knowing that he doesn't smile. Mr. Caldwell's words hit Jacob harder than he thought they would. He thought about Oliver, the quiet, shy boy who was always busy with schoolwork and books. He had done everything he could to keep his son stable, but maybe he had forgotten something much more important. Sophia said softly, "But when he dances, he smiles, and sometimes all a child needs is someone to listen." Jack turned away a little, his jaw tight, and it took him a moment to speak again, his voice quieter than normal. "So what do you plan to do?" Sophia looked at him very closely. "Do you mean I'll make him dance like it's magic?" she asked. "No," she said. "I just want him to feel something again. The rest is up to him." Jacob kept quiet as he thought about how he had spent years trying to control his job, home, and family, but maybe he had been missing the most important thing. At last, he exhaled with a sense of relief. "Oliver wants to compete in a dance tournament." Sophia didn't seem shocked. "I know." Jacob looked at her with his sharp, unwavering gaze. "I would rather not see my son fail," she said with a knowing look in her eyes. "I don't want him to give up before he's even tried." Jacob stood by the entry and watched in silence. Sophia Bennett was no longer the quiet maid she used to be. She had become a real coach, strict, patient, and unyielding. Oliver stood in the middle of the practice room with a sweaty face. He moved to the beat and tried to do the turn Sophia had just told him to do again. Sophia spoke in a strong but calm voice. Oliver let out a fast breath, wiped his forehead, and straightened up. He tried again, but it wasn't quite right. Jacob's chest tightened as he watched Oliver do the same thing over and over. What surprised him the most, though, was that his son never whined. Oliver wasn't the shy kid he used to be. He kept trying because he wanted to get better. Sophia agreed when Oliver finally got the spin right, but you can do even better. Jakob paid close attention to her and was interested in how she taught his kid. Sophia didn't smother Oliver or give him easy praise. Instead, she pushed him and set that task for him, and Oliver rose. As time went on, the training got harder, with long nights of endless repeats. Oliver never gave up on Jacob, even though he would never admit it. He became so interested in his son's journey that he went to most of his training classes and stood quietly in the corner, watching every move. Oliver made one night after practice. Oliver sat at the table looking at his unfinished meal. Jacob saw that his son's leg was bouncing a little under the table, which made him wonder, "What's on your mind?" Jacob asked in a quieter than usual voice. Oliver thought for a moment. "There's another dancer in the competition, and his name is Liam Parker," Jacob said, waiting. Oliver bit his lip. "He got the job twice in a row. He met me today and texted me, 'You don't have a chance against me.'" When Jacob looked at his son, he spoke slowly. "Do you understand what he's saying?" He shook his head. The voice of Jacob leaned forward and stayed steady. "People will only try to break you down if they see you as a danger." Oliver's eyes widen a little, and there's a change in his stance that makes you think so. Jacob nodded firmly. "I was aware of this, and for the first time in their conversation, Oliver smiled slightly. Then I'll show him he's wrong," I said. He let out a sigh as he watched his son. Oliver wasn't the same boy he used to be. The area behind the stage was tense and full of young dancers stretching and talking with their coaches as they prepared mentally for their shows. Oliver Caldwell stood among them, adjusting the straps on his dance shoes. His hands were still sweaty from training, but he wasn't afraid to dance. He was afraid of failing. Jacob stood a few feet away with his arms crossed, watching his son perform. It was the first time in his life that he felt helpless. He had spent his whole life controlling things and making sure they went as planned, but today there was no plan, and Oliver had to go on stage by himself. A hand gently touched Oliver's shoulder. Sophia stood next to him and said, "Take a deep, calm breath." Sophia continued, "You've done everything you can. Now all that's left is to dance." Oliver took a deep breath, and his nerves started to calm down a little. Jacob watched from a distance, and he felt something strange in his chest. There was something between them that he couldn't quite reach. He clenched his jaw, because now wasn't the time to think. Next on stage, Oliver called, "Well done." Oliver took a deep breath and moved his head to look at his father, who was asking him questions to make sure he was okay. Jacob gave Oliver a single nod and said, "Go." Oliver sucked in a deep breath and walked out onto the stage. The lights were too bright, and the crowd was dead quiet. What if I forget? What if I trip? Then he saw them. In the front row, his father watched without judgment, but with something steady and real next to him. Sophia secured the smallest knot, triggering the start of the music. Oliver let go, and he moved without thinking. Each step flowed into the next, not just with technique, but also with feeling. This was the most important thing Sophia had taught him. Then came the hardest part, a turn into a leap that he had failed more times than he could count. His breath caught for a split second. He began to worry. What if I fail? What if Santiago was right? His heart was racing, but then he saw them. His father and Sophia looked at him with eyes that were not filled with expectation, but with unshakable belief. He took a deep breath, pushed himself off the ground, and time slowed down. When he landed, the music stopped for a second, and then applause broke out. Oliver stood there, chest high. He could feel the rain and sweat running down his temple, but he knew he had done it at that very moment. Jacob got up from his seat and slowly clapped. Sophia did the same, and her eyes lit up with pride as the results were read. Liam Parker came in first. Oliver clenched his fists, but tried to stay calm. Then we'd also like to give a special award for artistic expression that recognizes not only skill, but also passion, emotion, and heart. This award goes to Oliver Caldwell, the announcer said. The crowd erupted again. Oliver blinked in surprise as he took the award and then turned to face the crowd. Jacob saw his son Oliver for the first time. He wasn't concerned about the results. What he saw in Oliver's eyes was confidence that he had never seen before. The night air was crisp outside the theater, and Oliver stepped out, running his fingers along the cool surface of his medal. Jacob and Sophia were ready to go. Jacob looked at his son for a long time before putting his hand on his shoulder and asking, "How do you feel?" Oliver tightened his grip on the medal as he thought about how proud he was of his answer. As they walked to the car, Oliver asked Sophia, "Can I keep training?" Sophia smiled but didn't answer. Instead, she looked at Jacob as if she didn't have the power to make the choice. Jacob looked at her, then back at Oliver. Oliver took a big breath and nodded. "Of course, we're just getting started," Jacob said. He smiled bigger, not because of the medal, but because he knew this was just the start. Jacob looked at his son and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, pride and hope. That night, the Caldwell house was quiet, and Oliver fell asleep still wearing his medal, as if he would rather not let go of the moment. With a glass of wine in his hand, Jacob stood on the balcony and looked up at the stars. But his mind wasn't on the sky, it was on Sophia. He heard soft footsteps behind him and turned around to see her standing there in a light coat, her hair falling over her shoulders. "I need to tell you something," Jacob said, his voice steady but full of something deeper. Sophia cocked her head and waited. Jacob took a deep breath. "For years, I thought that control was the key to happiness, that if I planned everything perfectly, I could protect the people I love. But then you came along and proved me wrong in the most beautiful way," he said. "You helped my son find himself again, but it wasn't just Oliver, it was me too." Sophia put down her glass and stepped closer. Sophia was about to say something, but Jacob took her hand softly. "I never knew what I was missing until you. I love you, Sophia." Not because she was scared, but because of something else, her eyes got bigger. Jake bent down slowly and took a small silk box out of his pocket. "Join our family, and I'll look out for you the way you've looked out for me." Oliver Spohr looked at him for a long time. As she looked into Jacob's eyes, her heart was racing with 1,000 thoughts of fear, hope, and disbelief. She had spent years running away, thinking she had lost everything, but now she realized she wasn't lost anymore. She had found a home. Her lips trembled before they curled into a genuine, deeply emotional smile. "Yes," Jacob let out a breath. As he put the ring on her finger, he felt a rush of happiness and relief. The wedding took place on a warm, sunny afternoon. Oliver wore a small suit and stood in the front row to watch his father and Sophia say their vows. His eyes were shining as he watched. When Jacob leaned in to kiss his new wife, there was a lot of applause. Oliver smiled the happiest smile of his life as he looked at his father and then at Sophia. Their family was complete. There was no more loss or sadness, only love and a fresh start.